The most important thing that I want people to take away from this is that you need to listen to the people who are living these experiences.
Welcome to Platform Z, or Z, whichever you prefer. Join me, Noah Lennon, as I speak with my generation about a range of topics and themes in the present day. Hello, listeners. Thank you for tuning in to the 12th episode of the podcast. Today, I'm speaking with a joyous spirit. She's a third-year student at Royal Holloway College studying for a BA degree in drama and creative writing. She's also an alumnus of the 2022 to 23 LAMDA Acting Foundation course. That is the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts. As well as that, she's an alumnus of National Youth Theatre. If she wasn't wonderful enough for you, she's also trilingual, speaking Spanish, English, and French. An enthralling performer, a great friend, and a generous soul. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Alix Lander.
Thank you, Noah. That's the sweetest thing. Oh, you're a wonderful friend too, and an enthralling performer, if I do say so myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Alix, and I promise I'm qualified to talk about this episode, as I myself am from Venezuela. Yeah.
Yes, probably should have mentioned that in the introduction, but there you go, guys. So, as you may have seen from the title, today we'll be discussing Venezuela in 2025, 2025. We'll be examining the current state of Venezuela, President Maduro's actions, opposition leader and activist Maria Corina Machado, and Trump's intentions with Venezuela, and everything in between. To start, I'll offer some initial brief context. At the time we're recording this episode, it is Saturday, the 15th of November. Now, this is changing every day. So what we say now may not be the truth in a few days or 5 days or a week's time, but based on what we have, based on the evidence that we have and what we know now, that's what we'll be discussing. In July 2024, Nicolas Maduro won a disputed presidential election in Venezuela, despite the opposition and many countries, including the US, rejecting the result and recognizing opposition candidate Edmundo González as the legitimate winner of the election. This meant that Maduro would be sworn in for his third term, with each term in Venezuelan presidency lasting 6 years, leaving Maduro in power until 2031. He first became president in April 2013 after succeeding former President Hugo Chavez, who had passed away. Since then, Venezuela has sunk into economic and societal collapse, with Maduro's authoritarian regime continuing to ignore and oppress the Venezuelan people despite their desires to return to a democracy. Of course, that's what I can comment on from my standpoint, but Alix knows much more on the topic. So, Alix, if you'd like to add on and continue with any more points on that.
Of course. Thank you, Noah. That was a really good brief rundown. I'm going to give such a huge rundown, so it's going to be chunky. So basically, this all started in 1999 when Hugo Chavez was voted into power, shortly after being released from prison, actually, for revolting against the government at the time. Venezuela has had a very long-standing legacy of corruption and classism and poverty, like genuinely every Latin American country. And Chavez vowed to essentially take money from the rich and give to the poor. But instead, he starved the poor and took the money for himself. He forced corporations and companies to sign over to his control and his power. And he essentially capitalized off of them, and the people received nothing. Chavez gained a liking for power, and he bribed the armed forces into his loyalty. He also bribed Russia and China into his alliance by giving them oil and by giving them the gold of the people, which is wild. Chavez and the military started working together as well to traffic narcotics through the world. So we had a narcotic trafficker as our president of the country. This is really small, but he made constant changes, which people don't really know about. Like, he added an 8th star to the Venezuelan flag. So you'll see a lot of like true Venezuelans waving around 7-star flags, and that's because that's the country that we know. And he also changed the name of the country to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela in 1999 to honor a man called Simón Bolívar, who was essentially a Venezuelan man who liberated a lot of Latin American countries from Spanish rule. But the most significant and shocking change was in 2007 when Chavez made 33 amendments to the constitution, including one where he would essentially be able to stay in power indefinitely. So in 2007, that marked the start of a dictatorship. And then in April 2013, as you mentioned, Chavez passed away, and Nicolás Maduro, Chavez's hand-picked successor, was voted in. And I say voted with air quotes because essentially at that point, the country was being run by people in his pockets. And so the votes were being counted by people that had been corrupted by Chavez. So Maduro was fated to win anyway. At the time, the opposition was led by Enrique Capriles, who, once the election results were announced, he asked to see the votes himself, and Maduro refused to show any sort of proof. And so Maduro stayed in power and has been in power since then. As you mentioned, since then, Maduro completely crashed the economy. Hyperinflation was huge. It reached, I think the biggest peak was 2.6 million% increase in 2019. You could sit down for a cup of coffee, and by the time you'd finished it, you would have to pay like triple the amount that you initially thought you would pay for it. There's a website actually, which is really good to see how bad it was in 2019. It'll put a piece of chicken or bread and the amount of Bolivian dollars that you needed to like pay for it. And it's shocking to see. Essentially at that time, the power and the value of the Bolivar was nothing. It still is nothing, to the point where people are making bags out of the banknotes. And they're really beautiful bags. My mom has one, but it's thousands of banknotes folded to make this really beautiful bag because it's insignificant. And the bag will cost around $5, American dollars. In 2018, actually, according to The Economist, the free market exchange rate was 3.5 million bolivares to $1. And it really hasn't gotten any better. So the minimum wage today is between $1.5 to $3.5 a month, which is around 130 bolivares a month. Meanwhile, a loaf of bread will cost you $3. So that's a whole month's salary for one loaf of bread. So the situation economically isn't great. Meanwhile, socially, also terrible. We've had many oppositions try and combat Maduro. In 2018, he held illegal elections because he just decided to randomly hold them in May when they were supposed to happen in December. He banned anyone from running against him and essentially declared himself president. And when the time came in December for the legal elections, a man called Juan Guaidó appointed himself as interim president, as he can do in Article 233 of the Venezuelan Constitution, which states that there is no legal president. Someone can step into those emergency powers, which he did because Maduro legally, technically, wasn't president of the time. We had this weird phase for a few years where we had two governments running at the same time and two presidents, but obviously Maduro had all the power because he had the military on his side, whom he'd also bribed into his pockets. And that was in 2019. So that was the same year as hyperinflation. And as a result, there were these huge mass protests and so much fighting, so many people being shot in the streets. In 2020, there was a concert held on the border at Colombia for aid. And when these trucks full of aid tried to pass into Venezuela, Maduro actually unleashed criminals from the prisons to stop the trucks. You cannot make this up. Circling back to this little thing I mentioned about Chavez being a drug trafficker, Maduro continued this legacy, and his nephews were actually stopped in the US in 2014 for trying to traffic 800 kilograms of cocaine, and they were imprisoned. Biden actually released them in 2022 in a prisoner swap, so they're back in Venezuela now. But for a while, that was great news for us because we were getting coverage. People were seeing that maybe everything wasn't okay with Maduro. We also had the biggest mass migration recorded in modern history. According to the UNHCR, which is a UN refugee agency, a total of 7.9 million Venezuelans have fled the country. Last summer, which is an important thing that you mentioned, Noah, we had an election in 2024. And a new opponent called Corina Machado was opposing Maduro. She's been on the scene, I'd say, since around Enrique Capriles. But Maduro banned her from running. So instead, a man called Edmundo González ran in her place instead. And he was backed by Corina. Once the results of the elections came in, they were published by the CNE, which is the Venezuelan Elections Authority, basically an agency run by Maduro's henchmen. And they claimed that Maduro had won by 51.2% and Edmundo got 44.2% of the votes. Now, this professor from Columbia University called Andrew Gelman ran these numbers through a probability model, and he ran them 1 million times through 1 million simulations to figure out an inconsistency in the numbers, which is all complicated math, so I won't really delve into it. It essentially said, by running this through 1 million simulations, that it's not possible. There is not one probability where this worked out. He said that there's 1 in 100 million chance that the numbers the CNE gave were actually accurate. Amazingly, Corina Machado was actually prepared for this, and she was able to get hold of the votes, of 83% of the votes, and she counted them herself. And we found that Edmundo had actually won by 67% of the votes and Maduro had 30%. Of course, protests erupted everywhere, but Maduro refused to give up power and he just cracked down. He sent military troops in to quell protests. People were kidnapped and disappeared, sent to torture centers like El Helicoide, which is a very infamous torture center in Latin America. Children were even sent there and separated from their families. There's more than 800 political prisoners there being held by the state at the moment, and those are just political opponents, journalists, children still. The government created an app where you could denounce your neighbor for being anti-Maduro, and within the first month of protests following the fraudulent elections, Maduro, as I said, he arrested over 100 children amongst 1,600 general arrests for protesting. In general, food is scarce, medicine is scarce, there are power cuts constantly, daily, you have to queue for hours and hours to get into the supermarkets to get food, and there's nothing when you get there. To top it all off, this is the last thing I'll say, Maduro had a bounty placed on his head of $15 million during Trump's first presidency. Biden upped it to $25 million last year, I think, right before his presidency ended, which is the same as Osama bin Laden. And Trump has just doubled it to $50 million in August. And no one is talking about this.
First of all, thank you for being so well informed on these issues and really going into the details, because if we don't go into the details, then people don't know. And on that note, I'll reveal to the listeners that I actually did not know what was going on in Venezuela. I, on the phone with Alix, found out on the phone what was going on because it just wasn't reaching me. The news wasn't reaching me. And I'm someone who does like to be informed and look at the news and understand what's going on in the world and care about what's going on in the world. So to not know what was going on was really concerning, considering the magnitude of the situation and how it's escalating and continuing to escalate every day. This is an ongoing crisis in Venezuela.
It is. It's been going on for 26 years now.
And on that note of what news reaches us, I think it's a reminder to all of us to educate ourselves and discover and consume information on our own terms. Don't just read one article or one news source. Make sure that you're doing as much as you can to understand the full picture, the full portrait of what is really going on in a country and make your own decisions, make your own judgment. We've touched on briefly Maria Corina Machado, the symbol of resistance, who actually on October the 10th won the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize. And according to the BBC, the Nobel Committee described her as one of the most extraordinary examples of civilian courage in Latin America in recent times. And I'll link that article in the description. Alix, would you like to give a little more backstory on Maria Corina Machado, what she's doing and why her work is positive?
So Maria Corina Machado has been a symbol of resistance against Maduro for many years now. She didn't fully come onto the scene as strongly as she has in the recent times, as she did in 2024. That was really her time when she took hold of the political stage of Venezuela and truly opposed Maduro. She's described as the Iron Lady in the country, and she's incredible because Venezuela as a whole is always very divided, and because of 26 years of Chavismo rule and of oppression, people tend to lose hope and faith so quickly. So Enrique Capriles we lost faith in him. Juan Guaido, who was the interim president, there was loss of faith in him as well, very, very quickly. Maria Corina was able to rally a whole country and mobilize and unite every Venezuelan against Maduro. She would parade through the streets, standing on top of her car, not even wearing a bulletproof vest. She would grab the hands of the people. She would talk to the people. She would listen to the people. She is brave and fierce and courageous, and she's relentless. Unfortunately, people are starting to lose hope again and faith because it's been a year and nothing is happening. It's so difficult because she has such a strong voice, and it has obviously rattled Maduro because he created an authoritarian regime after the 2024 elections. There's a reason so many people were getting arrested and kidnapped. It was because he was afraid of her power and her voice. But unfortunately, there's only so much we can do without international intervention. And there's only so much Maria Corina can do without being backed by international countries. But she is just incredible, I'd say.
Yeah, it is incredible. She's incredible. I really recommend everyone to check her out. Okay, Trump's intentions with Venezuela. On September the 2nd, 2025, Donald Trump revealed that the US military had carried out a strike against a fishing boat off the coast of Venezuela, killing all 11 people on board. The reason he gave for the strike was for drug smuggling. Since then, there have been 20 strikes in the Caribbean Sea and Eastern Pacific Ocean, with a total of 80 people killed, including the most recent strike on November the 12th. Many media reports argue that Trump's ultimate goal is to remove Nicolás Maduro from presidency in Venezuela, but a lot of it is still speculation. You can find an informative article on the matter linked in the description by Ara Friedman, I hope I said that right, in conversation with Michael Shifter, a professor in the Center for Latin American Studies at Georgetown University in the US. Alix, would you like to offer your opinion, your thoughts on Trump's intentions?
Of course. So Trump's intentions, or like American intentions, is always something I get asked about. And yes, it's true. There's a lot of speculation as we don't really know whether he will intentionally get rid of Maduro, whether he's just after oil and actually doesn't care if Maduro just stays there and just gives him access to the oil. But essentially, the opinion of any Venezuelan is that we don't care. We welcome any sort of intervention. We just hope, we do really hope that he is able to somehow just get rid of Maduro. And I think the reason we think it's possible is because oil and Maduro go hand in hand. He's not willing to give up the oil unless he himself is overthrown. So I think there's hope for us in that. If Trump is after the oil and simply the oil, he'll get rid of Maduro. So people always ask me, what about civilian killings? What about, if it's international intervention, what about like Iraq? We can't have another situation of that. And to that I say that people are dying anyway. I know that there's already been people killed in these strikes that Trump is implementing, and whether they're unlawful or not, people are still dying in Venezuela. People are starving. People are being killed by its own government for protesting against it. Between 2014 and 2024, Maduro's forces directly killed more than 220 protesters in protests. That doesn't mean in torture centers or anything, just outwardly in protests. Maduro's government have abused, tortured, disappeared, sexually abused, and killed thousands of people over the years. And Amnesty International have done so many reports on this. So you can look up Venezuela, Amnesty International, and you will find so much talking about this and the statistics and the data. Last year, after the fraudulent elections, the police and the military were rounding up opposition leaders and disappearing them. They would search people and civilians, and if they found any anti-government propaganda or messages on your phones, they would send you to a torture center and you disappear. Some people are still disappeared from those days. If you want to talk to people in the country, you have to talk in code. Especially if you're anti-government, you have to talk in code. If you want to talk about what's going on and their safety, you have to delete messages. You have to call. You can't text. And if you text, again, you delete the messages. People aren't strong enough to fight Maduro by themselves. They've just got their words. And then we thought we had hope with Maria Corina, but again, she only has her words and she can't do much without international intervention. The only hope we would have to overthrow Maduro would be a coup by the military, but the military has been bribed to be in Maduro's power. So there's no way that's going to happen, because if they ever do perform a coup, by the time the opposition gets into power, they're probably going to face corruption charges and get imprisoned, and they don't want to do that. So they're not going to turn on Maduro. So again, international intervention is genuinely the only way it could work. We don't want more deaths, but people are already dying. So we welcome any sort of coverage as well, any sort of news, any sort of curiosity, and any sort of intervention, good or bad.
Yeah, this is not an easy fix.
No.
Alix, what would be your message to fellow Venezuelans listening and to the rest of the world watching on as well?
To the Venezuelans listening, I'd say to not lose hope. I know it's very hard, and I know it's so easy to just say, we've been trying. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. We don't know what will happen in a year. And I think the worst thing we can do is just stay quiet. Fortunately, the people in the country kind of have no option to stay quiet. So I think the Venezuelans outside the country, it's our duty to speak. It's our duty to talk to people and make it known what's happening in Venezuela, because I think that's the only way we can change things. I think if people make enough noise, that our governments have to take action or have to just at least think about what's going on there, I think is so important. And to the rest of the world, I think listen is the biggest thing. I think it's a big problem that Venezuela isn't exactly in the mainstream of social media right now. And I think that's how a lot of news gets around to, especially our generation. I think we're so quick to, as I said, reject anything we don't agree with. And we're just so polarized. And I think cancel culture just hasn't helped that. The most important thing that I want people to take away from this is that you need to listen to the people who are living these experiences. You can't just assume something because you see it on social media and an influencer you like is talking about it. It's so important to do reading for yourself. It's so important to just not be a sheep, because that is exactly how we stay polarized and this black and white thinking happens. We're not reading enough anymore. We're not listening. We're not talking. We're just so used to living, to knowing what we don't like. We grow up in a society that we don't like. We know we don't like these political systems. And instead of just thinking, why don't we like it? How can we make it better? We just go for the complete opposite. Instead of reading between the lines, instead of reading the colors of the spectrum, instead of thinking for ourselves. And I think that's a huge, huge thing. I truly believe if we aren't constantly challenging our political beliefs or rethinking things and not thinking critically, then we can't change the world, because if you're not thinking critically, you don't have access to your voice. I want to be clear though, by challenging your beliefs, it's not challenging your morals. I'm very firm in my morals, but I mean, like you said, challenging what we listen to, what we hear, what we're told, what we see, what we engage with, what media we consume. We all have biases within us because of all these things that we hear and we're told, and we need to unlearn these biases. It's just about being aware and listening and being open. And yeah, the worst thing we can do to uphold the powers in place is to be a sheep.
Platform Z guests, this is how you do it. Previous guests and upcoming guests, that's how you do it. Take notes, people. This is preparation, execution. I cannot praise you enough, Alix, because yeah, I'm blown away. I have no words to say. It's so inspiring just to listen to. And you're leading by example by doing this. You really are. And please, please, please do check out the links that we'll put in the description. Please find things out for yourself, because another thing I'll say is that a lot of Latin America seems to be neglected and stereotyped quite easily into a country of drugs or a country of violence or a country that is very poor. But there's so much more to countries like Venezuela, Peru, Colombia, Uruguay, Panama, so many more, so many more. I'm just naming a few. But let's not stereotype. Let's find out things for ourselves. Let's listen to the people who are actually in these situations, who have lived these situations. Free thought, that's the power. We have free will in this country, the privilege to think for ourselves, to research for ourselves, to find out things for ourselves. And all of us should be an activist. All of us young people should be doing something, should know about things, should care about things, and should be pushing those things forward. Even if there's conflict, even if there's disagreements, let's use those disagreements, let's use those conflicts to create something that we can agree on. We're all connected. We all come from the same thing. Let's unite rather than divide. Let's move on to the Platform Z Quickfire questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's go. Vamos. Vamos. What was the most recent thing that inspired you?
I rewatched Black Swan for class. Well, I decided to write an essay on it, and I forgot how incredible it was. It's inspired me to write a screenplay. So I'm currently doing that at the moment. Incredible film. If no one's watched it, it's just a beautiful piece of art that shows this obsession with perfectionism. And also, I realized upon rewatching is the actual story of Swan Lake. So keep an eye out for that if you rewatch it.
Great. What is your goal for this month?
To write a play. I have a friend who wants me to write a play for him, and I have started it. And I intend to finish it. Yes, we'll see. I won't disclose too much information in case it falls through. But keep an eye on my socials if you're interested.
Amazing. What's one bad habit that you need to get rid of?
Going to sleep late. I do it every night. I did it last night. But I think it's just because I procrastinate. So I leave things to nighttime. So I think maybe then procrastination is the root cause. I'll shake off procrastination.
I think it's a big one for all of us. We've had that come up a few times as well, procrastination. What does joy look like to you?
To me, it looks like peace. I could be surrounded by 100 people and I'll feel peace because I love them. It's about love. It's about just feeling calm inside of my body. That's when I'm most joyous and most happy. And when I'm most energetic and bouncy, it's just when I have peace.
Oh my goodness. So beautiful. Wow. I love this question because I just get the best answers. That was an amazing answer.
No.
I love it. When have you felt the most love?
I think on my birthdays, I love my birthday because, well, I feel most joyous when I'm peaceful and when I'm with friends and family. And my birthdays is always the time for that to happen. I don't think I've ever done anything huge for my birthday. It's usually just gatherings, but I love it because I get to see the people I love. And usually they'll like surprise me with like cake or things. Last year we went to Buckingham Palace and I blew out my candles at Buckingham Palace, which was so funny. And I loved, and it was great. And I was surrounded by people I loved. And 2 years ago, I just texted a group chat with my friends, like saying, "Who wants to come to Hyde Park? I'll be there." And everyone showed up, and more people than I thought would. And people brought me flowers, and we played games, and it was just the best thing ever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What's the one thing you'd change in today's society?
I pondered about this one for a while, but I think for me, the root thing is education. I don't know how I'd change it, but I think it needs to be better. Nelson Mandela said that education is the most powerful thing you can use to change the world, the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. It's there right now at the moment. We are being educated, but there's different levels of education depending on how rich you are, and I think that's wrong. I don't know how I would change it, what I would do, but it just needs to be better because that is how we get better.
I think there's an issue with private schools. I think school is something that should be free. And as soon as money starts coming in, that's where issues come up. Even with college, I'm very passionate about the cost of university. I think university is extremely important and privilege and a luxury to be given that time to learn and educate yourself and have that time to experience and find yourself. But the cost of education is something that needs to change. That's what it is. That's the end of another episode. Thank you guys for listening. Alix, you've been incredible. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being patient with me. We had to chop around the dates a little bit, so thank you for that. And thank you for all of your research and your passion for the subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah, genuinely for giving this a platform because it's something that I feel really passionate about, something that, as I said, I feel it's my responsibility to share with the world. So when Noah asked me to do this, I was like, Venezuela. No doubt.
Claro. Viva Venezuela.
Viva Venezuela.
Vale. Take some time now, please, to tell the listeners where they can find you, what you've got going on, what you've got coming up.
I've been doing some work bits here and there. I did a short film recently, so that will be coming out soon. And coming up, I don't know, it's a mystery. We will find out. But I'm writing a play, which hopefully will be put on. And I'm going to write a screenplay. And if I love it, then I might make it into something. But you can find me on Instagram. You can find me, if you Google me, actually, you get quite a few results. So I'm around. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen because it hasn't been this quiet in years and I'm scared. But it's exciting. It's exciting.
Thank you all for listening. See you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. See you next time.